Hey, everyone. It's Betsy here again. And today we are going to start by factoring out a greatest common factor if we can. And then, if possible, we're going to take our trinomial and turn it into two binomials. So let's get started. All right. I hope you watched the last video because that will explain greatest common factor. So we're going to just go ahead and get to work with this. So let's first of all see if we can factor anything out of the whole trinomial or polynomial, whichever you would like to use. All right, so when I look at this trinomial, we got a 6, and a 12. The smaller number is 6. 6 goes into 12, so I can factor out a 6. All right. Oh, I don't like that color very much. Let's make it a little thicker. Maybe that'll help. 6. All right, now all the terms don't have an x, so that's all I can factor out. 6 times 1 is 6, that takes care of that, and then we have the x squared. A positive times a negative gives me that negative. I've already got the 6, but I need the x. A positive 6 times a negative gives me that negative. And 6 times 2 is 12. So we've factored out the greatest common factor. Now, we're going to go a little further with this problem. I want to change colors again because I don't know, I'm not feeling that color. Let's go with yellow. Yellow's nice and bright. All right, so what I need you to do, bring down your 6 and make 2 sets of parentheses. All right, everybody with me on that? You got 2 sets of parentheses. Now, in each parentheses, I want you to put an x because x times x gives me this x squared right here. Now, these numbers that go here have to multiply to 2, actually negative 2. So what multiplies the 2? 1 times 2. So when we multiply, we have to get negative 2. The only way to get a negative is if one's positive and one's negative, because a positive times a negative will give me that negative. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky. You see how the middle term is negative x or negative 1x? When I multiply these and these, they have to add to negative 1. The only choice I have for this one is 1 and 2. So I can either do a negative 1 plus 2, or I can do 1 minus 2. Well, negative 1 plus 2 is 1. 1 minus 2 is negative 1. That's what we want. So the 2 has to be the negative number, and the 1 has to be positive. Negative 2 plus 1 gives me negative 1. And we're done. Now, don't get discouraged because it takes time to understand this. All right? What I want you to hopefully get out of this one, though, is that when you multiply the first 2, it gives you the first number in your parentheses or variable. When you multiply the last 2, it gives you the last, oops, let me erase that. It gives you the last number in the parentheses. X times x is x squared. A positive 1 times a negative 2 is negative 2. And then when you add negative 2 plus 1, you get negative 1. The problems will eventually get a little harder, and we're going to use what's called the X box to solve those. But it'll be a lot of fun, okay? All right, let's take a look at the next one. So what can I factor out of the next one? Well, when I look at the coefficients, the numbers out front, I have a 2, a 10, and a 48. 2 is the smallest. All the numbers are even, so I could take a 2 out. Ooh, I don't like that color at all. No. Let's try this color. So we could take a 2 out. Now, if you also notice, every term has an m. And the smallest exponent is that 1. So we can take an m to the 1 out. If you want to take that and put the 1 there, you can. You don't have to. All right, let's make our set of parentheses. We've got 3 terms to start with. Remember, your terms are separated by plus or minus signs. So we have to have 3 terms in the parentheses. 2, we've got the 2. I got 1m here, I need 3, so I need the 2 more. M times m squared is m cubed, because remember, when you multiply and the bases are the same, you add those exponents. All right, a positive times a negative is going to give me that negative. 2 times 5 gives me the 10. I've got 1m here, but I need 2, so I got to put another m here. Are we doing okay? M times m, or m to the first if you prefer, is m squared, because when you multiply, you add the exponents. This positive 2m times a negative will give me this negative. And 2 times 24 is 48. And I've already got this m on the outside. Whew! So now we got the greatest common factor. So we've got 2m. So I'm going to put that 2m on the outside, and we're going to make our 2 sets of parentheses. Now, not every trinomial can be factored into 2 binomials. So remember that. When we get to solving equations where we need to factor a trinomial, if it's not factorable, then we use a quadratic formula, or we put it on a graphing calculator and we graph it, because the solutions are where your graph crosses the x-axis. It's your x-intercepts. All right, so again, here we go. La 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 la. I'm gonna try this color. I don't know why the colors look a little dim today. All right, M. Nope, that's not gonna do. We gotta find a better color. M times M gives me this M squared. Now we gotta say this is negative, so a positive times a negative will give me that negative. And we gotta think, what times what is 24? So 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 4. No, 24, not, what's with me today? 3 times 8, right? You caught me, I know you did. 3 times 8, 4 times 6. Those all multiply to 24, or 48, excuse me. Wait, 24. What's with me? All right, so 1 times 24 is 24, 2 times 12 is 24, 3 times 8 is 24, and 4 times 6 is 24. So one of these combinations is all we can use in these spots. Only one of them is going to work. All right, so let's take a look at how we're going to figure out which one it is. When I look at these, because the signs are different, when we combine the two numbers, we have to get this -5. So I've got 1 and 24. If I take 1 minus 24 or 24 minus 1, I'm not going to get a -5. 2 and 12, if you combine them in either way, you're not going to get a -5. 3 and 8, a -3 and a +8 gives you 5. But a +3 and a -8 will combine to -5. So we're going to put the 8 here and the 3 here. And if you were foiling this, you would multiply those, which would give you -8m. You would multiply these, which would give you 3m. And when you combine them, you get your -5. So we found it. We did it. Yay, 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 yay. So +3 and -8 is -5. See, these aren't bad because the coefficient for the m squared is 1. When it's not 1, it gets a little more difficult, but we can handle it. All right, let's take a look at our next problem. First of all, the coefficients, the numbers out front, 4, 24, 36. 36 is a constant. Will the smallest number 4 go into 24 and 36? Yes, I can take a 4 out. Do they all have an x? No. 36 does not have an x, so I can't take an x out. So make your parentheses. I've got 1, 2, 3 terms, so I need 3 terms in the parentheses. So let's take a look at this 4x squared. I've got the 4 on the outside. 4 times x squared is 4x squared. A positive times a negative gives me this negative. 4 times 6 is 24. And I still got to bring that x down. A positive times a positive is a positive. And 4 times 9 is 36. So I'm going to erase all this off of here now. Make that closer. So this is what we have. 4, if you multiply it out, if you distribute the 4 through, you get what you started with. 4 times x squared is 4x squared. 4 times a negative 6x is negative 24x. And 4 times a positive 9 is a positive 36. So now let's make our 2 sets of parentheses. X times x gives us x squared. Now, when I look at this back term, it's positive. Well, a positive times a positive is a positive, and a negative times a negative is a negative. So to determine if we use 2 positives or 2 negatives, you look at the middle term. The middle term is negative, so we're going to use 2 negatives. So when we add a negative and a negative, we're going to get a negative. When we multiply a negative times a negative, we're going to get this positive. So what multiplies to 9? 1 and 9 and 3 and 3. Well, if I do a -1 and a -9, that's not going to give me -6. That's going to give me -10. But a -3 and a -3 makes my -6. So we are done. There is another way you can write this answer. This is called a double root when you get the same factor. Double root. And we can write it like this. Oops. 4x minus 3. There's 2 of them, so square it. Same answer. If you were to graph this one, remember, this is a parabola. When you've got quadratic equations, your graph is a parabola. In this case, it's a regular U. What's going to happen here when you graph it, the factor is x minus 3, and it's a double root. So it's actually going to sit on the x-axis at 3. We'll get a little more into that later on. Let's take a look at number 4. Our leading coefficient is -5. The leading coefficient is the number in front of the degreed term. Your degreed term is the term with the biggest exponent, 2. So when I go to factor this, if the leading coefficient is negative, I'm going to factor out the negative. Why do I do that? Because when you're changing it to 2 binomials, it's much easier if the x squared term is positive. So that's why I do that. Now look at the 5. 5 is smaller than 40 and 80. Does 5 go into 40? Yes. Does 5 go into 80? Yes. So I can factor out a 5. Do all the terms have an x? No, so I can't take out an x. So what do we have left? I started with 3 terms. I need 3 terms in the parentheses. A -5 times x squared will give me the -5x squared. A -5 times the -8 will give me a +40, and then bring down your x. A negative times a negative gives me that positive. Just like here, a negative times a negative gives me that positive. And 5 times 16 is 80. So there, we factored out the greatest common factor. Now we're going to go one more step with it. So let's make our 2 sets of parentheses and see if we can factor this further. I've got x times x is x squared. A positive times a negative will give me that negative. Now we need to look at what multiplies the 16. 1 times 16, 2 times 8, 4 times 4. Because one's positive and one's negative, one of these has to be positive and one has to be negative. So you're going to actually subtract the 2 numbers to get this -8. So let's try that. If Or actually, yes, we're going to track, one's going to have to be positive, one's going to have to be negative. So if I take 8 minus 2, well, 16 minus 1, that's not going to give me an 8. 8 minus 2 gives me 6. 2 minus 8 gives me negative 6. So that doesn't work. 4 minus 4 gives me 0. So this one, we can't factor any further. I don't see anything where we can make this trinomial into a binomial. All right, 5 times 8 is 40. 5 times 16 is 80. 1 times 16 is 16. 2 times 8 is 16. 4 times 4 is 16. 16 and minus 1 will not give me that 8. 8 and negative 2 will not give me this 8. And negative 4 and positive 4 will not give me a negative 8. So we can't go any further on this one. It's done. If we were solving this, if this had an equal sign and it equals 0, then we would have to use a quadratic equation to get a decimal answer or put it on a graph and see where it crosses the x-axis. So not every problem will be factorable as trinomials. All right, so we are done with this one. Yay! Next, it's going to get a little more interesting because we're going to use what's called the X box. So come along with me. I'll see you in the next video.